Hello and welcome to this presentation on peer reviewing and building a team to construct a systematic review. So for today's presentation, we'll be covering quite a few topics, but the key points covered will be what is peer reviewing, the different types, and who is qualified to peer review. Additionally, we'll be talking about the basic foundations of a systematic review. So peer review is defined as a process of subjecting an author's scholarly work, research, or ideas to the scrutiny of others who are experts in the same field. Now, it encourages authors to strive to produce high-quality research that will advance the field of medicine and research in general. Peer review also supports and maintains integrity and authenticity in the advancement of science, and peer reviewers can be anyone. So, for example, it could be a student, it could be a graduate, someone who holds a PhD, someone who holds a medical certificate, the list goes on. Peer review is intended to serve two primary purposes. Now, the first is it acts as a filter to ensure that only high-quality research is published in journals, and secondly, peer review is intended to improve the quality of manuscripts that are deemed suitable for publication. So this is just an overview of the submission process for a paper to a specific journal. However, within this process, peer reviewing occurs. So, firstly, the authors of a paper or a manuscript will submit their paper to a suitable journal that specializes in relevant research field to their paper. Now, if the journal editors feel the paper sufficiently meets these requirements and is written by a credible source, then they will then send the paper to accomplished researchers in the field for a formal peer review. So, this is where we have our peer reviewing after the submission has been made. When a reviewer is provided with a paper, he or she reads it carefully and scrutinizes it to evaluate the validity of the science, the quality of the experimental design, and the appropriateness of the methods used. Then, the reviewer also needs to clarify that good judgment has been made within relation to the completion of the work, if it will contribute to the advancement in a specific field, and the peer reviewer also needs to evaluate the findings and determine if the work submitted is original. Additionally, just to add, at the end, reviewers identify any scientific errors and references that are missing or incorrect. So, of course, just as a summary, here we have our first submission in which the authors will submit their paper. The paper will then be sent to peer reviewers who are knowledgeable within that given field that the paper is in relation to. The paper may be reviewed again for second revisions, and then if the journal is satisfied, the paper will be accepted. Again, this is just kind of briefly touching on what was discussed in the previous page, but as you can see here, peer reviewers have numerous numbers of times where they have to peer review a given transcript or report to be submitted to a journal. So, as previously stated, anyone can be a peer reviewer for a paper. Even authors who have written the specific paper, to some extent, peer review their own manuscript. However, there are key criteria and skills that a peer reviewer needs to have in order to be a good peer reviewer. So, for example, they need to have expertise in the field. They need to have a specific reputation. For example, a lot of medical doctors and those who hold PhD, especially within the field of research in science, are made peer reviewers. A peer reviewer needs to be objective and impartial. There should be no bias given towards a manuscript that is submitted. They need to have effective communication skills as well, have an understanding of ethics, have good attention to detail when reading manuscripts, and be able to provide constructive criticism. So we've just touched base on what skills a peer reviewer requires. However, there are different types of peer reviewing that can occur when a paper is submitted to a journal to be peer reviewed. So for example, single anonymized peer review entails an author doesn't know the identity of the reviewer. Collaborative, for example, within the name, it means two or more reviewers work together to submit a unified report regarding a paper that is submitted to a journal. Post-publication review is peer reviewing that occurs once a publication has already been made, so the list goes on. So whilst peer reviewers have numerous skills that they need to entail to be a good peer reviewer, one of the key skills that they need to have is an understanding of ethics. So, for example, they need to make sure that confidentiality is maintained, so no information is leaked that could be corruptive. They need to maintain integrity, diligence, and be professional when they're reading people's manuscripts. They need to be objective, hence there needs to be an unbiased opinion provided when reading submitted work. There shouldn't be any conflict of interest. For example, they shouldn't have any ties to the authors who have submitted the paper. And as you can see here, they also need to be vigilant and timeless. So take their time when reading a manuscript that is submitted to a journal for peer reviewing. There are pros and cons to being a peer reviewer. So for example, being a peer reviewer is quite good. For example, elevates your own personal skills. It enhances confidence. It facilitates concise writing, not just for yourself as a peer reviewer, but also for the authors who have submitted the paper. It allows you to be more analytical, and it enables you to spot easy mistakes within a manuscript as well. However, some cons of being a peer reviewer include being over the top. Some individuals may be harsh as well. For example, again, this contributes towards bias. They may not be able to peer review a person's work due to personal reasons. Hence, they may be reluctant to judge someone else's work. And we're all human beings, we all make mistakes, but they may also overlook key mistakes, for example, grammar and punctuation. So in summary, a peer reviewer's role basically within the realms of research is quality control, to check for punctuation, to check that the literature matches up with current methods of ideology, to ensure that there's no bias, that there's perfect understanding, that the readers who read this manuscript are able to engage with it and the content that is within the paper. Next, we will be talking about how to build a systematic review team in order to create a systematic review report. So just briefly touching base on what a systematic review is, it's a comprehensive and structured synthesis of existing evidence on a specific research question or topic. So anyone can formulate a systematic review if you have a burning desire to answer a specific question or topic within the field of medicine and science. Now, when it comes to completing a team for your systematic review, every individual will have a specific role which will be designated in a fair way and contribute towards the final completion of your systematic review. So for example, you may have a team leader. Now this person may assist in multiple parts of the systematic review, but they are responsible for seeing the project from start to finish. You may have individuals that are given the role to screen your systematic review. So for example, they may have 2 rounds of screening amongst them. This will include screening the title, the abstract, and maybe the full text as well. You may even have search specialists within your team, so those that can use databases such as Embase, Medline, Cochrane Review, etc., etc. Now, if you're thinking of conducting a meta-analysis, you may need those who are very good with using statistical softwares, such as SPS. Now, when it comes to building your team's criteria, obviously, if you are the one that is designated as the team leader, it is your responsibility to ensure that all work is delegated in a fair manner and all work is given to those in relation to the skills that they currently have. So, for example, it will be your responsibility to define your literature search and selection, make sure that those who are doing the literature search are robust and the work that they acquire is in line with your inclusion and exclusion criteria. You will also need to ensure that there is a quality assessment conducted and data extraction is done in a systematic way. For example, you will need to use guidelines such as the PRISMA P guidelines and the PICO guidelines in order to ensure that when your paper is completed, that it is valid. And finally, for example, If you are wanting to do a meta-analysis, for example, or any other type of statistical analysis, you need to ensure that you have people within your team that are capable of doing this, but also be willing to help them as well. Now, just to add, again, as the team leader, if you are the one that's leading your systematic review team, you need to ensure that everyone is keeping up with their milestones and timelines as well. Ensure that team morale is kept up. Now, conducting a systematic review can be time consuming. It can be quite difficult if you come across obstacles, but it's your job as the team leader to ensure that morale is kept up within the team, and also just touch base with everyone within your team, ensuring that they're not struggling. If they are struggling, you will be there to assist them if necessary. Now, of course, there are a number of companies and organizations that offer training in order for you to develop your skills to write a systematic review. However, there are some free resources online that you can acquire and utilize. For example, YouTube has great videos on how to build a systematic review team and how to conduct a systematic review. Cochrane, Coursera. This book by Peter Lackey and Hakon Brian is brilliant as a basics or foundation of how to conduct research. The list goes on. Now, of course, if you're working in a team with other authors to write a systematic review, you need to ensure that your skills within the line of teamwork are of the utmost importance and kept along the way. For example, you need to communicate regularly with your other teammates. If there are challenges that you need to address, communicate this. If specific roles need to be delegated, this also needs to be communicative. Everyone needs to work together, hence needs to be collaborative in their approach to writing the systematic review. And of course, you'll be working with people with different personalities, from different backgrounds, but of course, you all need to come to a common ground when it comes to working on your systematic review and take into consideration other people's points of views as well. Now, when you are writing your systematic review, you need to ensure that it aligns with reporting standard guidelines which are known universally across the world of research. For example, PRISMA. PRISMA stands for Preferred Reporting Items for Systematic Reviews and Meta-Analysis. It is a set of guidelines developed to improve the reporting of systematic reviews and meta-analysis in research publications. Now, this is a prime example of a PRISMA P flowchart, which is normally used from start to finish when you are initially in your data extraction phase of your systematic review. So for example, you can see here it's broken down into 4 different categories. So the first is the identification phase, where you identify all the papers and resources that you utilize. The second is screening, general screening of the resources that you've acquired. The third is checking for eligibility of these sources that you have acquired, whether that be via books or the internet. And the final phase are the resources that you've decided to include within your systematic review. So, for example, this could be the number of eligible papers that fall in line with the topic which you have decided to choose for your systematic review. Now, things can't always go the way that you want them to go when writing a systematic review. For example, you may be stressed, you may have other commitments within your life, you may be in time constraints, you may have opposing opinions from the other authors within your systematic review, but it is your responsibility as an individual to remain calm, look at the bigger picture, and communicate effectively if there are any issues that you do face when you are writing your systematic review. Now, we've come to the end of the presentation, but just to cover the key points of building your systematic review team. As previously mentioned, everyone has a specific part to play in the formulation of a systematic review. It is a team leader's responsibility to delegate roles according to the prior expertise and skills that an individual has within the team. Now, multiple sources of materials can be utilized. However, they need to align with the topic that you are choosing, but also need to be compared to the standard guidelines within research, for example, PRISMA and PICO. Now, teamwork makes the dream work. Communicating effectively and working collaboratively ensures that the work gets done to a high standard. Thank you very much, and I hope you enjoyed this presentation.